Forbidden and lost books mentioned in the Bible. Many people believe that the Bible we read today contains everything that was ever written about God, faith, and the ancient world. That the Bible itself mentions books that are missing, forgotten, or never included. Books that once existed. Books that were known by prophets. Books that kings, priests, and scribes actually read. Some of these writings were lost to time, others were rejected, and some were considered too controversial to be included in the biblical canon. Today, we are going to explore the forbidden and lost books mentioned in the Bible itself and why they still matter. Stay until the end, because the last book might completely change the way you see biblical history. The Book of Enoch. One of the most mysterious books ever mentioned in the Bible is the Book of Enoch. Enoch is a fascinating figure. Genesis tells us that he walked with God and then he was no more because God took him. He did not die like others. But here is what many people don't realize. The Book of Jude in the New Testament directly quotes the Book of Enoch. That means early Christians were familiar with it. The Book of Enoch describes the fallen angels, the Nephilim, the corruption of humanity before the flood, detailed visions of heaven and judgment. For centuries, this book was considered lost until copies were discovered preserved in ancient Ethiopian manuscripts. Why was it removed from most Bibles? Because its content raised uncomfortable questions about angels, divine judgment, and spiritual authority. Yet, it shaped the worldview of early Jewish and Christian believers more than most people imagine. The Book of Jasher, the Bible mentions the Book of Jasher not once, but twice. In the Book of Joshua, we read about the sun standing still during battle. And the text says this event was recorded in the Book of Jasher. Later, in 2 Samuel, King David's lament is also said to be written in this same book. So what was the Book of Jasher? It appears to have been a historical record of heroic deeds, righteous acts, and major events in Israel's history. A book so respected that biblical authors referenced it as a reliable source, yet today we do not have the original version. Several later texts claim to be the Book of Jasher, but scholars still debate their authenticity. Its disappearance reminds us that the Bible is not a standalone document. It emerged from a much larger historical and literary world, the Book of the Wars of the Lord. This might be one of the most intriguing titles ever mentioned in Scripture. In the Book of Numbers, there is a direct reference to the Book of the Wars of the Lord. Think about that, a book dedicated entirely to God's battles. We know almost nothing about its content, but the name alone suggests it recorded divine interventions, victories, and conflicts involving Israel. Why was it not preserved? Possibly because it was considered a historical archive rather than sacred scripture. Or perhaps it was lost during wars, exiles, or the destruction of Jerusalem. Still, its mention proves that ancient Israel kept detailed records that went beyond what we now call the Bible, the Book of Nathan and the Book of Gad. In the books of Chronicles, we find references to writings by the prophet Nathan and the seer Gad. These men were not minor figures. Nathan confronted King David. Gad advised him during times of crisis. Their writings were considered important enough to document the reigns of Israel's kings, yet none of their books survived. What does this tell us? It shows that prophecy was not limited to what was later canonized. Many prophets spoke, wrote, and guided Israel, but only certain writings were preserved as scripture, not because the others were false, but because the canon had a specific purpose: to tell the story of God's covenant and redemption. The Acts of Solomon. The Bible tells us that he spoke thousands of proverbs and songs. but only a fraction of them are included in Scripture. Other writings, sometimes called the Acts of Solomon, are mentioned but lost. Imagine what knowledge, poetry, or wisdom may have been recorded and then disappeared. This reminds us that divine wisdom is vast, and what we have is what God allowed to remain, not necessarily everything that once existed. Why were these books excluded? This is where many people get confused. These books were not removed because of a conspiracy. The biblical canon was formed carefully over centuries based on apostolic authority, consistency with known doctrine, widespread use among believers. Some books were valuable historically, but not considered inspired scripture. Others were too fragmented, disputed, or lost before they could be evaluated. The Bible was never meant to include every religious text, only those that clearly testified to God's redemptive plan. What should we learn from this? First, these books do not undermine the Bible. They actually confirm it. They show that biblical authors lived in a real world with real records, traditions, and writings. Second, they remind us that God's message does not depend on hidden knowledge. Everything necessary for faith, salvation, and understanding God is already present in Scripture. And finally, they invite us to approach the Bible with humility, not as a closed mystery, but as a living testimony shaped by history, faith, and divine guidance. Final thought: the Bible is not weaker because these books exist. It is stronger because it has endured, while many writings faded into history. And perhaps that was always the plan. Call to action. Finally, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden and forgotten books of the Bible, subscribe to the channel, because we explore biblical history, mysteries, and faith every week. Leave a comment below which of these books surprised you the most. And if this video made you think, share it with someone who loves the Bible. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.